mindset. This was a guy that, could score when he needed to, especially his last 2 years on campus. And then, look, he would rebound just about as well as anybody. Remember, this guy finished with 39 and 23 in a game against Florida State one time. So, I just love everything about him. Really aggressive player, a guy that, was still a good rim protector on the defensive end. Wasn't fantastic. Wasn't a guy that, you're going to look at and say, okay, well, we're putting him up in the same echelon as John Henson. But, this is a guy that was on a team with Marcus Page and was in an ACC that, if you want to talk about ACC Player of the Year, Malcolm Brogdon won that award. And let's be real honest, that's one of those guys that, you could say, all right, well, that makes a little bit of sense why he was passed over for. So, I'm going to tell you, it was a tough back and forth, but Bryce Johnson is one of those guys that when you go back and look and you talk about him and Luke May, they are two guys that came in and were totally different players when they first arrived than when they came back or when they finished their careers as seniors. They grew about as much as we've seen just about any Tar Heels in their time, especially during this decade. So I lean with Bryce Johnson, but look, Tyler Zeller is another fantastic pick. And those were, center and small forward were the areas that I had the most debate about. I thought everyone else was relatively clear. I guess the big debate that we had seen as well was Henson and Johnson. A lot of people went with Bryce Johnson at power forward, and then everything else is pretty clear. Point guard. I'm kind of shocked that Kendall Marshall didn't get a little more run from people, but I think it's really just because you look at Joel Berry and Marcus Page; they were the better shooters of the three. That's why he doesn't get a ton of run. You talk about shooting guard, small forward area. You got to remember, early in the decade, they did not shoot the ball very well. It really took until Reggie Bullock came in, and that was finally when they started. The shooting came back. And then, of course, it reached its height last year when we had Cam Johnson there as well as Kobe White. So, I think there are a lot of interesting guys. And, I know you got a couple other guys that are that you listed in the article as some of the honorable mentions. So, there are definitely a lot of great players and some guys that we'll definitely look back on very fondly that didn't make it on the list.
Yeah, my honorable mentions list is pretty full. I listed Kendall Marshall, in my opinion, the best passer in the history of Carolina basketball, the best guy in the half court that we've ever seen. I got Kobe White on there as well because it'd be interesting to see where Kobe White's numbers stuck up if he would have stayed 4 years. This guy could have challenged maybe the scoring record because he could score at that kind of volume. I got Reggie Bullock on that list, Harrison Barnes, Theo Pinson, Luke May, Bryce Johnson, Isaiah Hicks, Kenny Meeks, all known commodities, all guys that were a big part of a lot of big-time wins, a lot of ACC championship wins, a lot of wins in the NCAA tournament. So you can check that article. It's up on HeelToughBlog.com. And you can. So we did. I'll put something up on Twitter and Facebook, and we'll do this as we close. We wanted to hear from you guys on what's your all-time list, and so we got a couple of replies. I got a guy, Jim Moore, replied. He's got Joel Berry, Marcus Page, Justin Jackson, Bryce Johnson, Tyler Zeller. So 4 of the 5 that I had.
Right. That's, Bryce is pretty much the sub. Again, we talked about that. That's going to be a very common theme here.
And I think the thing with Bryce, and look, I was a big fan of Bryce Johnson. I think it's because he's more recent. He's we've seen him play more recently than we saw John Henson. My problem with Bryce was it was a 1 year that he was a big-time player, big-time contributor, where John Henson, both of his sophomore and junior years, was more productive. Craig Smith replied. He went Marcus Page, Joel Berry, Cam Johnson, Tyler Zeller, and Bryce Johnson. So he had your exact 5.
No. Remember, I went with Justin Jackson over Cam
Johnson.
Did you?
Oh.
Yeah, I did go with him just because of
the way you talked. It made me seem like you went with.
Okay, so I wanted to make I didn't want to completely agree with you on everything because that's usually how these podcasts go when we do things like this. So I did want to show the argument that Cam had, but I went with Jackson just because I think his all-around game was just a little bit better than Cam's.
Okay.
That was the only reason that I went that way. But that's another really good lineup that you could throw out on the floor and could have a lot of success with.
Coach Sigmund replied on Twitter, Page, Barry, Barnes, Johnson, and Zeller. So everything we've gotten back from you guys is kind of where we were debating ourselves.
How about the small forward, though? 3 different guys on there. 3 guys that all were willing. We didn't really talk a whole lot about Harrison Barnes, but is that because Harrison Barnes came in as the number 1 player in the country and he was supposed to be good. He was good, but I'm not going to say he was a disappointment because that's not really how I'd like to classify it. But, I mean, when you look back at it, he was a 5-star player that I don't like number 1 player in the class. I don't think that when he left college, we were thinking, okay, he did exactly what we thought he was going to do here at Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, look, a part of that is the way Carolina runs its program, where like it is a more team-oriented stuff. Even though he was a number 1 recruit, this isn't Duke, Kentucky, those kind of schools that they bring in all that talent. Well, we're gonna showcase those guys, and if we lose, then we're just gonna blame depth at the end of the season. That's not how this works. But I mean, he had the big shot to beat Florida State as a freshman. He scored 40 points in the ACC tournament against Clemson in the quarterfinal. I mean, 2 years he won 2 ACC regular season championships and played in 2 Elite Eights. So that's why I said was a big part of what they did, but it was just he wasn't a flashy player. He was just a guy that scored 18 to 20 points, but did it quietly, because he was so efficient. And like I said, it's just not the way that Roy Williams wasn't going to make everything run through him because he was the number 1 recruit in high school. So that was that was a big part of it. So we do want to thank you guys for giving us a little bit of feedback. We did enjoy getting those lists, and you can continue to give those to us, whether it's on Twitter. I'm at Joshua Marlowe 5. He's on Twitter at Future Tar Heel, or on the Facebook page. The article will be up there from the Heel Tough blog Facebook page. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Before we let you go, though, cannot let you leave without hearing about the HeelToughBlog.com. You hear me talk about this at the end of every episode. We're really starting to push. We want you guys to become subscribers or members to the website. And look, we've got a lot of great content on there right now. I've got the Yale recap where Roy Williams tied Dean Smith for 879 wins. We've got the all-decade team up there. We're getting into ACC play, so those articles will be heating up with ACC conversation-wise on the basketball front. Football-wise, look, season might be over. Doesn't mean that there isn't. That means there's no more news. 2 guys entered the transfer portal yesterday. Go on the website, find out who those 2 guys are and what it means for Carolina as we get into 2020. And lastly, we do want to encourage you guys to subscribe to the podcast wherever you find it. We're on Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever, on every platform. Give us a like, give us a review. We'll greatly appreciate that. We want to thank you guys for listening to this edition of the podcast. Happy New Year, and as always, go Tar Heels.